everyone, and welcome to Right Left. And today I want to talk about and demonstrate using a fountain pen for sketching. And I really have just a few pens that I use for sketching. And really, my main pen for sketching is this Pelican. These are the same pen, right? Just in different colors. But I don't tend to use these as often for sketching. I use them more for just everyday writing, letter writing, that kind of thing. This is sort of my dedicated sketching pen, and I keep there's a document-proof ink in here that is waterproof by Diatramentis. And right now, I think it's called Fog Gray. There's an example of drawing. Okay, it's called Fog Gray, and it's sort of, no, I'm sorry, I have the brown in here. Okay, I have the brown in here, document brown. So anyways, this is a Pelican M200, and it is a fine nib. And I say that because usually for drawing pens, I prefer an extra fine nib. But the thing is with the Pelican is that you can get these really beautiful fine lines when you hold the pen upright or upside down, but the pen has the ability to go thicker. It's got some flex in it if you're careful, and that is really unusual for a steel nib, okay, in the fountain pen world. Typically, unless it's specifically made to be a flex nib. This nib is getting dirty. I don't know why it's so dirty. Typically, you're not going to see that unless it's specifically made to be a flex nib. So I really love this pen for sketching. That's the Pelican M200. It's kind of an expensive pen, so I don't recommend it to people as far as a sketching pen unless you really are a dedicated sketcher and you will use it for other purposes as well. I can't recommend it, right? But there is another pen that I also love for sketching, and it's this one. It's the Kaweco Brass Sport. And this pen has an extra fine nib on it. Right now I have Diamine Prussian blue ink in here. I ordered some Diatramentis document black to put in this pen for travel. So I have a waterproof pen to do some travel sketching, and we'll see how that works. I've never used that ink in this pen, so I'm used to the Diamine in this pen. But so this is the extra fine nib. It's the regular steel nib, just in a gold tint, okay? And it's the standard Kaweco nib. Now, this, and I may need new ink actually. I'm not sure because it's kind of being pokey. And usually this pen is not pokey. So it does have it has a much finer line than the Pelican if you just write normally with it, right? But I can get an even finer line that sort of trails off into oblivion if I turn the pen upside down. So it's not as wet of a writer as the Pelican, where I can get a pretty fine line, but this one can get just super fine, almost disappear, right? And then when I tilt it in other directions, I can get a darker line, and it has a little bit of give, but not too much. But you see there is some line variation there. And so this is a much more, well, it's much more affordable than this. It's still $60, $70, $80 pen, depending on where you get it. You can also get the $25 to $30 Kawecos with an extra fine nib. It's going to be the same exact nib, okay? I bought this nib separate. This pen, I actually originally got it with a medium nib, and I quickly changed my mind, and so I purchased this nib for $11. That's an extra fine nib, and the nibs just screw into the brass pen. This pen, you can also get a new nib. They just don't screw in, you just pop them in. But you can buy them with an extra fine nib. I don't have a plastic one. Mine are mostly mediums. Like this is a medium, and you can see this is a light color in the medium, but the thing is even with the medium nib, you can get a pretty fine line, right? And then this is a darker ink, so this might be easier to show you. This is the medium nib. Do you see you can get a pretty fine line if you're sketching with the wrong side of the pen, and then when you turn it over, you can go and get more line variation, right? So there's always a way, right? There's always a way. Now, hold on just a second. I'm getting a phone call. Let's just stop that. Okay. This is a double broad nib. And even with this one, not quite as fine, but you can still get a pretty fine line with the back side of the pen. All right. And this is the case for most pens, right? So this is not unique to Kaweco. And then you can get this pretty broad line like this. So in theory, really, the broader the nib, the more variation you get, right? But there's something about this extra fine nib. I like the scratchiness of it, and I like that I can really trail off to almost nothing. It is definitely the finest of them. And I can't get as thick, right? But typically, I don't need to get any thicker than that. All right, so in theory, the broader the nib, the more line variation you can get if you are willing to manipulate your pen in different directions. Let's take a look at this left-handed Lamy Safari. So this pen has it comes only in the left-hand nib. So you can also get a Lamy in regular nibs from extra fine to double broad also, but this only comes in the left-handed nib. If I turn this pen upside down, I get a finer line, so I can get a little bit of line variation, right? But not as much as with these other ones. This one is just a little bit different the way the nib is positioned. Let me see if I have any other ones. This is my Sailor, and this is actually pretty. This is a medium fine, but it's actually really fine, and it's a really stiff nib and really scratchy, and it does not work well for sketching, I don't think. But it's my favorite pen for writing. Okay. I don't really have. Let me see my Moon Man. This pen, I believe this is an extra fine. And you can get pretty fine lines with this, but there's just not a huge amount. It gets a little darker, but it is possible also with this pen. I don't think they came in any other widths, but I'm not positive. I think it only came in this nib. So possible with this one too. So just so you see, it's possible with most fountain pens to use them for sketching, right? There's just some that you're going to prefer more than others. This pen, hands down, is my very favorite because I can get really, really fine to pretty broad, and it's got some flex in it. And I know I need to be careful with that because I could break the nib, but I'm pretty used to this pen, right? So I know what it's capable of. And so far, it's just been an awesome pen for sketching. So those are just some thoughts that I have. And, I honestly don't know if it's the same experience for a right-handed person. I really don't know. So I would love it if one of you would try this and tell me how your pens react to sketching with all surfaces of the pen, right? So I wanted to show you, just if I were going to sketch something small, like this piece of lavender, how it works when you're actually sketching something. And for me, I tend to start with it on the tip. And it's easier for me to start with it on the wrong side, and sometimes I'll dab it off just to remove some of the extra ink. And I'm typically sketching with this other side for my first pass of something, right? And I leave a lot of white space at first. And I can always double up on a line if I want it to be darker without having to turn my pen over. So you'll notice that I spend quite a bit of time, with my pen in the upside down position when I'm sketching. In the beginning stages. When I go back to a second pass and I start to add in darker features, I'll turn it over. But let's just say that I decide just to sketch with it regularly and not on the tippy toe or on the back side. How would that work? So you'll notice that it gets pretty dark and wet really quickly, right? There's a big difference, and you're basically dealing with a pretty thick line at that point. Even an extra fine nib is not fine enough in my opinion, to get really nice line variation. Okay, so if I get something a little bigger, like maybe like an acorn cap with the cat hair on it. I'm still going to start with the back side of my pen. And the nice thing is I can make these lovely pen sketches. And if I use a document ink, then I can use watercolor, right? The other thing that's super handy is stippling, and you can do that with the back side as well. And stippling is a great way to get subtle shading with a fountain pen, with any kind of pen really, but it's just a great way to get that subtle shading that can happen. So you'll notice that I spend quite a bit of time with my pen in the upside down position. And it's just, to me, a better sketching tool. Now, I know there are people who get special nibs made for their pens, and the needle nibs and needlepoint nibs and things like that. I have never done that. I don't even know how much that would cost. I've just always found a way to make it work. Here's where a point where I want to get that really dark color, so I turn it around, right? If I want to go really dark, I turn it around. All right, so you can see that it's very doable to make very detailed sketches with a fountain pen. Does it hurt the fountain pen to use it upside down like this? I don't think so. I mean, I've been using this pen for 4 or 5 years now, and I've never had a problem with it. It's been a really reliable pen. So I don't think that it's an issue. And I love drawing with pen because it forces me to slow down and really look at what I'm doing. And I draw in the seeing drawing method, where I am drawing by paying attention to what I see and marking down what my eye sees and not what I know. And I'm not a big picture person mostly. I'm a detail person. So I'm really just holding something in my hand and I'm allowing it to unfold on the paper. And is it perfect? Never. Never. But does it capture the essence of what I'm trying to draw? I hope so. Almost always. A little bit, right? So it's just such an enjoyable thing to draw with a fountain pen. And you've got this, what I love about it is instead of a dip pen, you can just go and go and go, right? You can sketch without having to worry about dipping. Can you get more expressive and more variety with a dip pen? Absolutely, you can. But I am perfectly happy with what I have here. It's just how I like to draw. Most of the time, unless if I'm going to be working on a big fine drawing of pen and ink, which I rarely do anymore, I might use a dip pen. Or now I have my Kaweco brass nib, which I've done a video on. You can watch that. So you can see this is just a really wonderful sketcher. One thing that's really nice about this is if you were going to draw something with line weight, let me just grab this. So if I'm just doing the outline of something, I can start with the really fine line in the lighter areas. And if I go to a part that gets darker, I can turn it around and I can get pretty dark. And then I can go back to the fine line and then go dark where I need to. And you get that line variation. And then you can just turn it and go thicker where you need to, right? So it's just super convenient that way, to draw this way with a fountain pen. Yeah. All right, so hopefully that was informative in some way. And what I would really like to know is, especially for right-handed people, if you take your fountain pens, try a few of them and see if that method works for you. Turning it upside down to sketch, and my mailman's here, I was waving at him. Turning it upside down to sketch, or sketching with it on its tiptoe, and to see, how that works for you, if it does work for you. And if there are any pens that don't work very well, like my Lamy left-handed pen, it just doesn't work. But this Kaweco works pretty great. Sometimes I have to get it started. It needs a new cartridge, so it's kind of running out of ink. But I'm not going to put a new one in because I'm about to travel with that. But it is actually, when it's fully loaded and working well, I get the finest possible lines with this pen, and they get that kind of light, scratchy feel to them, which is really desirable sometimes on my first pass. Okay? All right, everybody, that's it. I hope this was helpful, and I really would love to hear your feedback on how this method might work for you and your pens, and which pens are good at it that you have, and which pens probably aren't. Okay? All right. Take care. Thanks so much. Bye.